Good evening, everybody, and welcome to another edition of 108 Stitches Baseball Talk. My name is Scott Morgan Roth, the Motor City Man Mouth, and we once again have a three-man booth. And that three-man booth starts with David Levin. How's everything going north of I-95 up in Jacksonville?
How are we all tonight? A lot of heat, a lot of steam from these winds that we've got going on here, and we're all staying inside and trying to stay safe from everything that's going on around us. How are y'all doing tonight?
I'm doing all right, and Stuart Hack joins us again. We had so much fun the first time. We're bringing Mr. Hack on as long as he wants to be a part of it. We've developed ourselves a great three-man booth. How you doing tonight, Stuart?
I'm doing great. So I guess I'm going to be becoming the next Jessica Mendoza to add something to the show.
Well, you know, Jessica Mendoza is what she is. But there's no doubt your contributions are going to be unbelievably appreciated and welcomed, without a doubt, Stuart. We are so glad to have you back, and we want to have you on as often as you can be here with us. So we're on to something, guys. All right, with that said, since this is a baseball show, David Levin, lead off.
All right. So, Stuart, I know we talked a lot last week about the coming of the new season, but I want to re-examine that a little bit. Now that we have a definition of what's going to happen and training camps have started over again for the second time, players are starting to opt out because they're worried about health and concerns, and rightfully so. Do you think that Major League Baseball should now go ahead and scrap this? Because there's some big league names that are deciding they don't want to play right now. And how much is that going to hurt the product that's already shortened enough?
You know, David, right now I think there's only like 4 or 5 players that have officially opted out. I know the Phillies had a bunch of players today. I think 4 players alone that tested positive. I don't think they're going to scrap it. I think there's too much money involved. You know, the owners are losing a ton of money as it is. They don't want to lose any more by scrapping the season. So I think they're going to do what it takes to just play the 60-game season, and hopefully they have some plans if, worst-case scenarios, players opting out, players getting sick. But I don't think they're going to stop it.
And that was part of the next thing I wanted to ask. Does it get to a point, though, where you have too many players that are testing positive or too many things going on in the middle of the season where they're going to say, you know what, we got to stop this? Here in Jacksonville, they've been averaging 7,000 to 9,000 cases in Duval County the last couple of days, where everything is popping up. And Florida is the hotbed right now for the pandemic. Doesn't that change things a little bit?
Well, I think it's going to depend on who specifically is testing positive. So if you have players like Logan Morrison who are testing positive, probably it's not going to have that much of an effect. But if you have people like Mike Trout, Max Scherzer, guys like that, big names that are going down with this, that could make them rethink this. But if they're trying to keep them away from everyone, if they're able to do that, then I think, and they'll just, it would probably take a major number of named players to scrap this. That's not to say they shouldn't have already, but I think they're determined to play this season by hook or by crook.
I get the same impression too, especially with the television deal that's in place. I know. I had heard. You have the baseball package, the extra innings package, and I felt that Major League Baseball should have made that free this year for the 60 games. But what I heard was they're doing, even though they're only playing 60 games, which is, maybe 35% of the normal schedule, they're charging 50% of the price, which I think is a bad job by baseball, because you don't want to, you've sort of alienated the fans already with the stuff that went on, to try and come to an agreement on this. And now, I think the MLB package normally is like $170, so you're going to charge $85 for a 60-game schedule that you hope is played, and I think they should have just showed good faith and just made it free.
Yeah, let me step into that one. I think you're right. First of all, we don't plan on getting the MLB package this year, even though we've gone ahead and done it the last several years. 60 games, and I even heard today that Rob Manfred went on record, the commissioner, saying that he would says they're probably going to be lucky to get 60. So I think that as the numbers continue to rise, I know today here in Florida that the number of 10,000 new cases, and it doesn't figure to get any easier. Think about the last week or so, we're hitting 8,000, 9,000 on a consistent basis, and today, by the way, over 10,000, really. And let's not lose sight of the fact worldwide, over 500,000, I believe, deaths have been worldwide. So this thing is getting ugly to the point where we may not be at the second wave yet, but we're pretty darn close to it. So I'm not buying that package. And you're right, Stuart. It would have been a better PR job to give it away anyways.
Right.
Yeah, at least for this year.
Right. Well, yeah, of course.
Unfortunately, I have to buy it for work, so.
But just so you know, David, it's a business deduction for you.
No, I know it is. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Taxman. I appreciate that. No, I itemize very well.
And by the way, that is not a jock tax. By the way, that's just a plain old whatever.
Right.
What you've got? See, you know what, Stuart? In the time you've been doing this, you got jock tax engraved into my head. Okay, you've got that rule change engraved into David Levin's head. So you're all of a sudden we have some Stuart Hackisms that are inside of our head. You know, we got to think of some Stuart Hackisms. How about that, Stu?
Oh, boy.
Yes. All right, getting back to baseball. If everybody has, both of you guys have had a chance to look at how they are doing the player rosters now, starting with the 60-man player pool and starting to knock it down week by week in increments. Everybody seems to be going with youth. Do you think that waters down the product? Do you think that this is basically the precursor to this, the September expansion, but it's starting earlier? Does that hurt the game?
It's uncharted territory. You have to see once that, you had the replacement players in 95. If they hadn't settled, you would have had the same questions then if you would have started the season with replacement players. So it's hard to say. You might, with the youth, you might get the next superstar that you might not normally have gotten in an 162-game schedule. Or it could turn out to be something like a joke, players falling all over themselves, and that'll hurt the game. I don't think anybody can really tell for certainty what this is going to look like.
Okay. I don't think it helps. I don't think it hurts right this moment, but I can see it becoming a situation where teams that were expected to do well don't come out of the gate fast, and they start relying on looking at what's ahead. Maybe a veteran ball club that stumbles along the way. I wonder how that works with service time, and I know Scott and I have talked about that before, about how it affects people's players' service time over the years, especially the players that were just drafted that were added to the 60-man roster. It can't hurt because it's exciting, and I'm sure for the younger fans, they get to see players that are talked about like Torkelson or Asa Lacy or the Max Meyer here in Miami. Those are players that people are aware of, so they get to see them early on. I just think maybe it's just a trial and error thing where we see how that is affected.
I think the trade deadline is going to be another interesting thing, which is now August 31st, where a lot of teams may still very well be in this with an expanded playoff and a shorter schedule. I mean, you figure by the end of August, teams would have played 30, 35 games. They have like 25 to go.
Right.
Unless you're 10 and 25, you're going to probably hold on to a lot of your players, although I guess with the expanded rosters, maybe you have a little bit more leeway if you see another team with the strength and you want to get rid of some dead weight. There's going to be a lot of things, and I wonder, hopefully the teams, the general managers are taking all that into account. I think everything is on the table.
The one thing that interests me when I was listening to various sound bites yesterday, Don Mattingly said immediately, hey, we're in the middle of a playoff race. I don't think I don't know remember the last time Marlins fans even heard that comment from anybody. They haven't had a winning season since 2009, haven't been in the playoffs since 2003. This is, like you said, this is uncharted territory. When you look at the rosters now, who has the advantage? Will the pitchers be ahead of the game, or do you think the hitters are the ones that are going to, spray the ball all over the field? There's got to be a decided advantage from somebody. Who is it?
I would think as long as everybody is on the same as far as his workout schedule. And later on, I do want to talk about the group of players that were in Palm Beach Gardens. But assuming everybody else is on a similar schedule, I would think it would almost be like a regular spring training where the pitchers will be ahead. I read Garrett Cole was throwing today. He was throwing a session at 97 to 99 miles an hour. So if you get a hitter, he's not going to be able to catch that. He's not going to catch up to that. So I think the pitchers will come in ahead. The question is, how long can they go? And are the bullpen, if the bullpens collapse, then I guess the hitters can catch up in the later innings. So it could almost be a game-by-game procession as to who's ahead. But I think starting pitchers, especially the elite ones, will have an advantage. So teams that, have a couple of good starting pitchers could get off to a quick start that way, if the pitchers can go deep into the games and the bullpen holds on. It's going to be interesting to watch how the season plays out. And I think every game, every week is going to be something different and things can go in a different direction. And you always will have the threat this year that they could shut down at any time.
Right.
All right,
let me ask you this, too. Oh, sorry, go ahead, Scott.
All right, let me ask you a question. So you bring up a couple of interesting points. So we have a shortened season. So how do you gauge a manager's performance? Do you think there will be many managerial firings at the end of this year? And then the second part of that question is, you got Ron Gardenhire, who, to me, is in the final year of his contract. My gut feeling is he should still get another year, because of the shortened season. But let's talk about managerial firings. Well, what would it take for a manager to get fired under these unprecedented times?
I think for the most part, they'll have a pass this year because of everything that's going on. However, Don Mattingly saying that the Marlins are in the playoff race, if they start slow and fall out quickly, it's very possible, and they get a look at some of the young players that maybe aren't panning out, he could go. They could just take him out. But I think for the most part, I think managers will get a pass this year. Someone like Gardenhire, maybe they give him another 1-year contract. If he wants to manage, he may be at a point where he was ready. He was thinking, this will be my last year. I mean, let's face it, he likely in a normal season wasn't going to be in the playoffs. So you have to think what certain managers, what their goals are too. So you may see people just decide to hang it up. Will Dusty Baker come back for a second year? He wasn't even expected to be managing Houston at this point. Right. So he comes in for 60 games. Is he going to want to do it for another year?
Well,
he may. Go ahead.
Yeah, think about Ron Gardenhire, though. This is really interesting. David was talking about what Spencer Torkelson and the Tigers are loading up on a lot of young players. Ron Gardenhire could very well be finding his fountain of youth with some of the players that the Tigers are really about to put out there, don't you think? The fountain of youth.
Right. Can I answer that?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Fountain of youth. Go ahead.
I agree that it's a fountain of youth, and I think that, first of all, I agree with you about Mattingly. I didn't expect him to come back, honestly. When he got the contract extension, I was like, wow. I seriously thought he was going to offer the job to Jorge Posada for some reason. That, Posada was there as his right-hand man, and he was going to get offered a job to manage. And Mattingly wasn't coming back after 4 years of losing. This is really important for Mattingly to show that in a short time he can take a roster full of growing talent. And, it's not like being in the Dodgers where everything was basically handed to him. That team was stacked to begin with when he got there. So if he only wins 10 games in the first 30, yeah, I could see him getting the axe. As far as the other teams, Detroit's a team that you're going to have to watch in 3 or 4 years because they're going to be winning World Series titles. Gardenhire is right there to mold that and to take care of it. It's kind of like the baby chicken. You care for it, you keep it warm, you make sure it's fed. It's all these things, and you protect it, and then you pass it off to somebody else. So it depends on when he wants to make that transition, or the organization wants to make that transition. Well, I'm curious to see what happens with that.
Yeah, David, you bring up an interesting example, okay, and being obviously from the Detroit area as I am. I remember when Ralph Houck built the Detroit Tigers after that, 1968, and then, of course, Sparky Anderson finished the job. So, of course, he had a little Les Moss in there before the Tigers jumped on Sparky Anderson, but That's a good comparison. I think one team that might actually get out of this easy might be the Houston Astros, because who knows how many times they would have been plunked and hit by a pitch, knowing that you only have 60 games versus 162 to get whacked.
And no one's even talking about that now.
No, but not we are.
Yeah.
So what are your thoughts
you
about?
You have to know the owner of the Houston Astros is thanking the gods right now for what's going on, because they are not the center of attention.
So I want both of your opinions on that now that I brought it up about the Houston Astros. How many black and blue marks are going to get hit with?
I told you, every single pitch.
Okay.
No, I don't think it's going to be that big of a deal now, because I think that the conversation has switched. When's the last time we really talked about Houston cheating? We haven't. It's there. But I doubt seriously they're just going to pick it right back up and say, "Ooh, I got to go plunk this guy."
And, with rosters being expanded, there'll be players that really had no involvement in this.
Right.
They're not going to get plunked.
That's true.
It might be something where the Astros, like a lot of things, will get a pass this year. But I think, too, there are other players around Major League Baseball, other managers, coaches, that have a pretty good memory of things. So if 2021 is a full schedule... It is a full schedule and things are back to normal that way, then yes, I could see next year the plunks starting again.
Totally agree, Stu. Go ahead, David.
I do. Okay, moving right along.
Okay.
The playoff package was so important before negotiations with the players. And because they signed the playoff package, I know that angered the MLBPA. So, what happens, and this can happen in a 60-game season, they get two small market teams in the World Series, whether it be, I'm going to say the Marlins and Kansas City, for that matter. Major League Baseball wants to make money off of big league names, big league teams, pageantry history. What kind of black eye is that if they get two small market teams that don't have great attendance and don't have the history? I mean, this could all backfire on them, couldn't it?
I think if you have a good PR person, they can overcome it. I think if it is the Marlins and the Royals, you build up the past history for that. You maybe get some of the people who were on World Series teams or World Series teams for both teams to make appearances, just to generate fans' interest. Let's see George Brett. Let's see, some of the Marlin players from back in the day that were on their World Series teams. Generate interest any way you can. Everyone knows it's not a typical season. It's not going to be a normal season. So if there's some good human interest stories out there, use them, mold them, promote them. Do what you can to get the name out.
Let me ask you this, too, because we know that the Marlins have two World Series titles in 26 years, which I know some teams would kill to have. But again, they're still a losing franchise. How much does Derek Jeter play in the season of the success of this team, in that he's started to really build that organization, that roster? This is Jeter's dream, so to speak. And if it fails again, there are a lot of questions. But if it hits, how much are they going to hail him? I don't want to say a genius, but he did know what he was doing.
If they make the playoffs, it's obviously a good thing for them. I don't think necessarily it's a bad thing if they miss the playoffs this year, because in a normal season, they weren't going to be playoff contenders. It would be good to see some of the young players show some promise in playing time that they get this year. That would help to give some hope going into next year. And we had mentioned this last week. If the Marlins, even if they don't make it but are in a playoff race until mid-September, that helps young players. It gives them experience in a pennant race, in a playoff race. And then next year, they're not as raw as maybe they would have been if they would have played 162 games this year and really not even contended at all. Maybe they would have played 5-10 games, but not, a little bit of improvement. But now if they, in a 60-game season, they contend, then there's optimism for the Marlins.
Before the stoppage in the middle of March, I had the Marlins winning 70 games, which would have been a 13-game improvement, which in most Major League circles, that's pretty darn good for a team with a losing franchise. I'm hoping they get close to 30. And for some reason, I'm hoping that Novocaine that I talk about where they don't know any better, they just go out there and play ball. I hope that takes over and there's excitement there, but that's what you want to see more than anything. You still want to see these guys, love playing the game and all the excitement that goes along with it.
Right. Now, have you heard anything as far as teams playing in front of fans?
No, and that was my next question. God, Stu, I love you, man. I have not heard that yet. Well, I'm going to say that.
All I heard.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, David. All I heard about the fact that Chicago was entertaining it, but that was about a week or so ago. But other than that, and face it,
the Marlins were entertaining it towards the end of the season, possibly if there was a playoff. Haven't heard anything else.
Well, the Tampa Bay Rays never play in front of fans, so it doesn't make any difference. So it's immaterial. And the Marlins, huh? Yeah, bump. Okay, I'll have a little laughter here. But the Marlins, well, they don't play in front of a lot of them anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Just kidding. But just thought, since you brought the fans thing up, I just go ahead there and throw you a good curveball that you will all have to think about.
That's fine. So let me ask you this, though.
Okay.
We know the situation of Florida, and we know that the COVID-19 tests are skyrocketing. But also, let's preface this, guys. There are more tests out there, so there are going to be more positives, and I think everybody understands that too. The more tests you have, the more results you have. The NFL is working on a possible program here where if they let fans come to the games, and granted, it's still a couple months out, fans would have to sign a waiver saying they're not going to hold the NFL responsible if they get sick. Could you see something like that in Major League Baseball?
You could, I don't know if you necessarily have to have them sign something, but you could put something on the back of the ticket or on, whatever they print out saying that Major League Baseball, and by someone purchasing the ticket and using the ticket to enter the stadium, I mean, I'm not an attorney, but I believe that they would be agreeing to that by just coming to the game.
Right. The MLB is exempt if you, per se, got sick because you're agreeing to take the responsibility yourself.
Right.
Okay. What do you think, Scott?
Well, yeah, do I think that they'll probably sign a waiver? Yeah, but I don't think, you're not going to see any fans this year, so there won't be any waivers being signed. I don't see it.
Okay. That took care of that.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're asking me, first of all, we're not even sure how far this sport's going to go. We saw that earlier, I read, and I think I reiterated it before. Rob Manfred said they'd be lucky to get 60 games in, and all you have to do is keep nodding your head with every stat that gets thrown in front of you. Now, if this game were played in France, okay, why am I bringing fans up? Because the French Open is talking about from September 27th through October 11th, they're looking at 60%. That's a different story, but that's out there in the croissant country, not over in this country. Okay, so it shows you a little bit about my food knowledge, right, guys?
It was impressive.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Can't cook as well as I talk about it, but all right, that's beside the point. Go ahead.
All right. That's what I have for baseball. Do you want to talk a little more football, or Scott, do you want to jump in?
Well, I think you guys are right. I'm kind of intrigued about these smaller market teams, playing.
I am too.
But, I don't think, like you say, David, it's going to make that big of a difference anyhow, because you never know what certain teams are going to emerge at any given time as a surprise team. The only thing that we can't lose sight of the fact that in a sport this year we're looking at 60 games. We still contrast it with the NFL that there's more urgency early. So those hot starts really become hot starts. I know I've talked about the Detroit Tigers a lot, and I will a little bit more, but back in 1984, when the Tigers got off to that 35-5 start, all they had to do was play 500 ball, and they steamrolled their way to a World Series. Well, so what type of a start, Stuart, would it take for a team to get enough momentum during an abbreviated season to make it almost look like it's somewhat out of reach?
I would think a team that could go 16-4 over the first 20 games would have enough momentum, barring positive corona tests and other things, to get a playoff spot at the minimum.
That's 80% right there. I mean, that's almost unbeatable. I tend to agree. You win 15 or 16 of your first 20, and you're in.
Because if you go 16-4, and then you go 500 the rest of the way, you're 36-24. That's 600 ball.
There you go. Yeah. I'll be darned. Look at all this mathematics we're getting hit in front of us. And
phonics really paid off on them.
Well, while we're talking baseball, how could a baseball show be with the three of us not talking about Bobby Bonilla Day? How about that?
Because I didn't get the $1.1 million sent to me, and it would have made, I'm still waiting for my contract like that.
Yeah, well, join the club, Levin.
Well, a lot. You have that, but Brett Saberhagen is still getting paid $250,000 a year by the Mets as well.
Is he really?
I saw that.
and you make fun, but Bruce Sutter, and I didn't know this till a couple of days ago, has a similar contract as to Bobby Bonilla with the Atlanta Braves.
Really?
Yes. Yeah.
All right.
And the Nationals, I think, now have signed some of their players. Like, I think I saw Max Scherzer is going to get some sort of deferred payments to, 2090.
Yeah, I knew about Scherzer.
I believe it was part of the deal that it wasn't the original deal. They had reworked it, so they had more money freed up. But he said he paid quite a bit.
Well, that was the only way they were going to sign Scherzer, but he knew that. How much money can you burn through? So, Stuart, since you're the tax guy of us, okay, let's talk about these four unbelievable things. You said we have Brett Saberhagen, right? Is that correct?
Right.
So give us a blow-by-blow on that one. You got Brett Saberhagen, Bobby Bonilla. We're going to have a little bit of fun since it was Bobby Bonilla Day. We have to go ahead and honor that day on the same day when you had Canada Day, by the way, just for our people north of the border. So break down those deals, Stu.
Well, obviously it's taxable income. It's deferred payment. I don't know if Bobby Bo is taking federal withholding on that.
He is. I read. Hold on. He is after taxes. It's still $600,000 a year for him.
Okay, so he's taking some. So he's smart. So he's not going to override when he files his return. My belief is this is New York-based income. It's not where he's in different states because he's not playing anymore. So it's coming from I guess you can make the case. He's not really playing anywhere, so I don't know where his domicile is now. So say he.
Well, I heard it's in Florida. I heard it's in Florida somewhere, but that's just what
it is. It is in Florida. I just don't know where.
Yeah, I don't know.
So I'm still led to believe, though, that he must be getting some New York. If he's netting $600,000 on that contract, you have Social Security and Medicare, which is, it's 6.2% for Social Security, 1.45 for Medicare. If they're withholding 20% for federal, now that's up to 30%. So I'm thinking with some state withholding, New York, I think it's like 10, 11% now. I'm not sure the exact number. I've been out of there a while. It sounds like he has a New York filing requirement for doing that, as would Brett Saberhagen likely as well.
So go into more details on that Brett Saberhagen contract now that you brought it up.
It was similar to Bonilla. He's only getting $250,000 a year, and I'm not sure exactly how long that goes to. I think Bobby Bo goes to 2035. So
yeah, that's what it is.
The jokes will go, for another 15 years with him.
Yeah, right. Okay.
You almost want you wonder if you wonder after the 2035 season, you think he applies for free agency?
Yeah, right. You wonder.
If he could still swing a bat, he probably could play DH somewhere.
This would be the season for him to try it.
Hey, listen, there was talk that the Giants would probably go ahead and probably bring on Barry Bonds and get his Hall of Fame clock started again in the season.
Yeah, I saw that.
Did you? So, come on, now that we're going to have some fun with this broadcast, what are your thoughts about it? How realistic or unrealistic or bizarre would Barry Bonds be? Hey, he's revered in San Francisco, even if nobody else can stand him, so the Giants would probably throw him a bone.
Nice.
You know what? If he gets one at bat,
right?
Does this clock reset?
Yes, it does. I believe it does.
But can Major League Baseball come in and say, this was publicity, we're not going to reset his clock for one at bat?
Yeah, they probably could.
If you recall, they used to give players the choice of what hat they would wear when they got in the Hall of Fame.
Right.
And then Wade Boggs signed a 1-year contract with Tampa Bay, and part of the contract was Tampa Bay said, when you get in the Hall of Fame, you'll do it wearing the Tampa Bay hat.
Really?
And Major League Baseball stepped in, and they changed the rule because of that, where they decide they'll take a player's input. Like in the case of a Piazza, where he could have gone in as a Met or a Dodger, but they ultimately have the final decision. And if he plays 1 year in a place, he's not going in for that team. So something similar now with Bonds. If Bonds gets 1 or 10 at bats with the Giants this year, and he says, okay, my clock is starting again, I'm hoping all the writers that didn't, they're gone, and they're younger writers who don't remember what happened, and maybe I'll get in. But I could see where Major League Baseball will step in and say, this isn't right. It was a freakish season to begin with. You're doing this, to reset your clock. It's not because the Giants all of a sudden had a need, a designated hitter, and you were the best player available. It's a publicity stunt. So I see where Major League Baseball could step in and maybe change the rule for Hall of Fame as far as, players who sit out and then come back.
They could, but here's the deal in this situation, though, Stu and Dave. All right, let's just say, you have a certain season with 60 games, okay, but let's just say hypothetically he were to play 20 or 30 games because you got the universal DH anyhow, then it would be hard for them to really alter it. I really think that they'd have to bite the bullet on this one, knowing that universal DH, Barry could swing the bat. Then it's pretty hard to really change it at that point. Now, let's go back to the Wade Boggs. Obviously, the Rays signed him with that intent, but let's not kid yourself. Wade Boggs is undoubtedly the best baseball prospect that's come out of the Tampa Bay area, and we know that why at that time I think they were the Devil Rays, weren't they? We're bringing him in there to draw, and he's a folk town and hometown hero, and I think his number is retired there anyways. But you're right. MLB or the Hall of Fame has their final say in the hats, but that was the biggest and obvious reason about why they made that rule change. So you got Brett Saberhagen, you got Bobby Bonilla, you got Bruce Sutter and Max Scherzer, and who knows what day Max Scherzer's day will be anyways. I don't even know, but it's certainly interesting how we have a tax guy breaking down all these bizarre contracts.
And I just checked, Saberhagen's going to get paid till 2029.
2020.
I need to hold Brett and talk to him a little bit.
Manny Ramirez is going to actually get a total of $24.2 million from the Red Sox through 2026.
Wow.
Really? So Bruce Sutter had a deal with the Braves before the '85 season. He was going to be paid $750,000 a year while he was with the Braves, and then for 30 years after he retired, he received at least $1.12 million a year. So this is the last year for him. It was through 2020.
Oh, okay.
So he got the $750,000, 89 and 90, and then he retired after that. So his 30 years began in 1991, and they end this year.
Well, it comes off to the book after 30 years. My goodness.
Hey guys, just so you know, I was 11 years old here in Jacksonville watching Saberhagen when he was 19 years old, pitched for the Jacksonville Suns, who was the Royals Double-A team back then.
Well,
he was so many feet back then.
Let me take it a step further, David. I was covering the Florida State League at the time, living in South Florida, when he played for the Fort Myers Royals.
Fort Myers, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually covering it, so I remember.
I remember what year it was. I had to look it up, but it was '83. I was 11.
Yeah,
wow.
Well, we know that. Okay, you were 11.
And when I watched him pitch for the Mets, I was an accountant and I was working.
Yeah, right. So we obviously
not much has changed.
So
I understand.
Yeah. So in David's case, it was a fountain of youth, and for us, Stuart, it was anything but, right?
Yeah.
Mark Gubizzo was there too.
What's that?
Remember that? Mark Gubizzo was here too.
Yeah.
I remember him.
Both of them pitching at the same time.
Yeah, well,
that's unreal.
We can talk about all these minor leagues, but nothing will still compare to the Gasonia Rangers in '87. I had Sammy Sosa, Juan Gonzalez.
And I'll give you that.
Yeah, you gotta. We're bringing the minor leagues up. Hey, think about it, Stuart. We had a guy by the name of Clint Studer on the other day, who owns the Pensacola Blue Wahoos, and he manages Beloit Snappers, and you talk about a most unbelievable person I've ever had on this broadcast. Quint was definitely one of those where it was unbelievable. Hopefully a lot of those folks will listen to it, and it will be aired on a future edition of No Limits. But it was unbelievable when you talk about the dynamics of minor league baseball and what he does with his air bed and breakfast out up in Pensacola. But yeah, those contracts are definitely amazing on the heel, once again, of jock taxes. So, all right, continue on, David. Didn't mean to get you off track, but
it's okay. I want to ask a few questions about football because it ties in with what we've been talking about a little bit.
Well, let me do one thing before you do that, David. Okay, I remember when Gordie Howe signed on to play for the Detroit Vipers for a shift, and he was the only player in hockey history to play in 6 decades of professional hockey. So Gordie Howe of the Detroit Vipers. So go ahead.
So we were talking a little bit about the games and how they're going to be affected, and whether it's going to be fans in the stands. Stuart, do you think that because the NFL has now decided they want to cut back 2 of the preseason games, does that help or hurt the product, number one? Inevitably, all they're doing is holding players back from the field because they're worried about contact. How much does the lack of training or practice hurt the players for this year especially?
Well, I don't think they said they were going to hold back on practice. They were just going to cut a couple of games. And when you think about it, a starter, how much do they play in the preseason anyway? The Rams, I think they don't even play their starters at all during the preseason. You know, the first time they go on the field is the first game of the regular season. So I don't think it hurts the product if they're just cutting preseason games. The players should still get practices in, you know, whatever contact they were doing, but they're not going to be playing. They probably weren't going to be playing much in the preseason anyway, in the games.
Yeah.
Well, let me tell you this. Let me tell you this, David. I remember, and Stuart probably might as well, when the NFL at one point was 6 preseason games and 14.
Right.
Yeah.
And I remember that, and then all of a sudden it went 16-4. Now you're looking at potentially 2, and who knows and probably 3 next year. So, you know, and then who knows, you might see teams scrimmaging with one another a couple of weeks of those years that those games would be eliminated. So there'll be some interesting trends about what you can talk about in terms of preseason games with the NFL. So in an experimental year where everything is completely and unquestionably in play, this is just another dynamic to what you're talking about, David.
Earlier this week, I think it was Rodney Harrison, but I'm not sure who said it. I want to say it was him. This is a contact sport. We yell at each other. We spit at each other. We drool at each other. We tackle each other. We're going to roll around on the field with each other. We're going to bleed together. This is the ultimate gladiator sport where COVID is thrown out the window. How is the NFL really going to get this to work without players constantly being sick?
You know, that'll be interesting to watch. I'm not sure how they do it.
You know, do you think that there's any possibility that we get to a point where they say, you know what, we're not going to do this, or we're going to cut the season in half?
You know, I think by the time the NFL starts, they'll have the advantage. I know they're a little bit more of contact. They'll have the advantage of seeing the NBA playing, the NHL playing, Major League Baseball playing, and seeing how they are dealing with potential issues that come up. So the NFL is the last to start, and perhaps, you know, by watching the others, they could kind of get an idea. I mean, I don't see them going to touch football. You know, that's not the NFL. So they're going to have to, you know, figure out something. You know, players are wearing, you know, they wear the helmets. I don't know how much, if there's a special helmet or something they can do to maybe add a little bit more protection. I don't think you can have players wear masks over their faces.
No.
You know, especially,
I don't think so.
You know, for a long, so it becomes challenging. I guess, you know, you test often. For this season, you try and keep them away from other people that are not their teammates or coaches, and you just roll the dice and hope for the best.
Well, you know, I've been hearing the last couple of days and this is as far-fetched as I can throw your guys' way, the Ivy League is thinking about playing in the spring with just 7 conference games, and now the Pac-12 is kicking the tires on the idea. So this is a story I want you guys to pay close attention to as time goes on. Even though the Alliance of American Football League and XFL are out, who's to say the NFL wouldn't consider maybe moving their season perhaps into January or February and playing. I'm just talking right now, guys. Who knows? But when you talk about the Ivy League and the Pac-12 considering, let's just do conference games only. Now, again, you're talking about colleges compared to the pros. Who knows how that would work out and how far you stretch it out. And these are things that we can only talk and speculate on. Just throwing that out there.
You may see a lot of things that, like, for example, for the most part, the NFL, the NBA, and the NHL, they have some minor leagues, but it's not a lot. Major League Baseball had a lot of minor league leagues and teams. Every team had several minor league affiliates, ranging from rookie ball to AAA. So this year, the minor league season's been canceled, and that's going to hurt a lot of these towns that rely on the minor league, the revenue that these teams bring in to their small cities, and they're gone. You may see something with Major League Baseball going forward where they may just have one league, that's kind of like a Continental Basketball League or an AHL, EHL, and a hockey. It's going to be a lot smaller, and the talent pool is going to be a lot less. And I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing or a bad thing, but you're going to see, I think that's going to be the biggest change that baseball takes from this after this season, is pretty much the death of the minor league system as they knew it.
Okay. Go ahead, David.
It's definitely going to be affected. I know that here in Jacksonville, they're really bummed about the fact it's not going to be here because it started the summer. It is a generational thing. Minor league baseball has been in Jacksonville since the 1900s. And there are people that are very upset about it not being around this year. Moving right along, I'm going to throw a curveball at you, and then I'm going to get back to stuff with COVID. But I have to ask this.
Okay.
Did Cam Newton just walk into the greatest situation he could walk into, figuring out that if he happens to take the New England Patriots to the playoffs with Belichick and not Tom Brady, that you have to kind of figure that maybe the coach is better than the quarterback? Or how's that all going to play out for him?
It's a great situation for him. I think Belichick will do better than Brady. I mean, Belichick, I think it was 2008 when Brady got hurt in the first game.
Right.
I don't think they made the playoffs, but they were a winning team.
I think they were 9-7, right?
9-7 or 10-6. They didn't make the playoffs. Now Brady.
Well, you had Matt Castle when Brady went down, taking over for Tom Brady. That's what it did. So right. Matt Castle is your signal caller. But go ahead. I just wanted to throw that in there.
Right, but he was someone that was thrown into a situation unexpectedly, and he did well. You credit Belichick for having him ready to go in and pretty much keep everything rolling. Belichick has proven in the past with players like Randy Moss, players that maybe had problems in other places, and he's got them to see the New England way of doing things. And I think Cam Newton should thrive in this, and I think New England will be successful. Now, Brady, we'll have to see how much he has left in the tank. He's going to be, I think, 44 this year. And, I mean, let's face it, as we all get older, our reflexes, go down a little bit. And, I realize he feels he has something to prove, but I think it's easier for Belichick to be successful than for Brady to be successful.
Well, don't lose sight of the fact that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offensive line isn't that great. If Brady takes too many hits, then that's not going to help Tommy's case either.
Right.
No. I'm calling it a push right now. I bet that New England and Tampa both finish 8-8. And then you can't really, you can't say who's better.
Now,
that'll be the best for
Now, on the Sports Exchange earlier, I was talking to Mel Farr, and remember, Josh McDaniels, your offensive coordinator, used to coach for the Denver Broncos and went ahead and had a guy by the name of Tim Tebow on there. Now, let's not kid ourselves, okay? Tim Tebow's throwing mechanics were awful. That's the reason he did not make it in the NFL or couldn't stay because of his passing, but he was a dynamic runner. So you can't compare him totally to Cam Newton, but you could certainly compare the mobility aspect. So I think that Josh McDaniels is looking for a transformation project, and I think Belichick's willing to adapt to see what he's got. But remember, you're also talking about the fact that the Patriots brought in Tim Tebow, gave him a shot, and he didn't make it after the final cut. So there's a little bit of a history with the Tebow/Newton dynamic, or an ironic dynamic. So do either of you two want to
Well, I don't think Tebow was ever a thought to be a starting quarterback then.
Right.
No.
And Newton, he may not be ready by game one, but I think the plan is early in the season, at the latest, he would be the starting quarterback, and he would expect it to, win. So I think there's more expectations coming in with Newton than there was with Tebow, because when they brought Tebow in, they had Brady.
Right. But bear in mind, when you talk about Tim Tebow, if they didn't get Peyton Manning, you wonder if John Elway would have kept Tebow as his starter, knowing full well they did win a playoff game. Think about it. Tim Tebow won a playoff game, and how many quarterbacks in the NFL, great quarterbacks, good quarterbacks, have even won a playoff game, and Tim Tebow is not one of those. So just thought I'd throw that out there since David brought up the Cam Newton thing. But yeah, I think you're right, David. It is a push now that Belichick has a wild card with Newton coming to town, and then you wonder about Brady. But I think, again, it's the offensive line. I do. But continue on, David. Just wanted to throw that out there for you guys.
I'm going to throw this back at you real quick, Scott.
Sure.
Biggest indictment of the Jaguars right now. Who is Tom Brady's backup?
Go ahead. I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to.
Who is that?
Blaine Gabbert's his backup.
Okay.
And his offensive coordinator is Byron Leftwich.
I would think Byron Leftwich should be the backup quarterback, not Blaine Gabbert, but go ahead.
He's the offensive coordinator. I don't know how two successfully bad Jaguars wind up in that situation. That's my trivia for tonight. Anyway, getting back to what we were talking about, because I'll hurry this up. Stuart, since we have seen a handful of players start to opt out for Major League Baseball, do you see any NFL players, because it's a shortened season and there is more risk, do you see them opting out at all?
I could see some doing that for the same reasons that Major League Baseball is doing, sure.
Okay. And if there are enough big names, what happens? How does the NFL change its marketing strategy with that?
I think they have to see who specifically it is before they, similar to what we were talking about, if there's a Royal Marlin World Series, you have to look at it from the standpoint of who you got, not who left. And you have to build up who's staying and who's playing and market them. You can't control, star players saying, I just don't feel comfortable playing and leaving. You can't control that. So what you have to do is take the players that are staying and just build them up and make the fans have an interest in them.
Well, I mean, if you're going to talk about names, the easiest way to do it is when you go to the NBA bubble pretty soon. Let's say, heaven forbid, either LeBron James or Giannis Antetokounmpo make it all the way to the finals. One of them comes out with COVID-19, and you have the most lopsided matchup between two teams that are evenly matched, if for no other reason because the superstar thing is imbalanced. So, again, as many people have said about COVID-19, we don't know. This is an enemy we know nothing about. Anytime you're dealing with general conflict or combat situation, you know who your enemy is, but we don't. We know who our enemy is, but we don't have an answer. We don't have a vaccine. We don't have anything except staggering numbers. I think in Florida, down here, Stuart, didn't we have a 11-year-old being the youngest COVID-19 case, or one of them?
In Miami, right?
Right, in Miami. So all of a sudden, we've talked about older people, and now we're down in the mid-30s and 40s, and all of a sudden, an 11-year-old becomes the latest casualty. So I mean, this thing is really like all off the chart. You know, I now that I thought about this, guys, okay, I think the Detroit Tigers signed a deal with a betting company, didn't they? The first bookmaker. Do you guys know anything about that today? I just entered my mind. They're the first team to do it.
That's the first I've heard of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, for our next broadcast, let's do a little bit of homework on that. But I think the Tigers did sign a deal with a bookmaker, the first team that's ever done it. So I'm wondering if that's a trend that we'll have to definitely keep tabs on for sure. So,
I wonder if Las Vegas is going to do over and under with wins this year for baseball.
Yeah, it kind of makes you wonder a little, doesn't it? So, David,
that's definitely a discussion for another show.
So, David, we're giving you some homework for our next broadcast about the Tigers signing with a bookmaker.
I just wrote it down.
Did you?
I just wrote it. That's my homework, I know.
Yeah, well, I mean, because then you wonder about the new different dynamics, and then we open up the story about gambling with Pete Rose, and oh my goodness, there's a show there, but we won't go there tonight with that. But, you know.
No, please don't. Okay, last question.
Go ahead.
If you don't mind. All right. Is it possible that, I do believe there's going to be an NFL season, but do you believe there's a possibility we don't get 16 games? And if so, will there be an asterisk by records and, you know, statistics and things like that for the year?
I guess it depends how many games they play. You know, if they play 12, 14, you know, they've done that before years ago.
Right.
So I don't think there would necessarily be an asterisk. And then I guess you have to decide if they only get 7 or 8 in. At that point, you have to decide if it even pays to have a season, because you know you play 8 games. You know, you could have a lot of teams that are 5-3, and 4-4. You know, in these 12-way ties for the final wild card.
Yeah, but you know what, though?
That's not lucrative enough for the NFL with that, I don't think.
Yeah, David, though, you bring up a really good point. If the NFL never had an asterisk with some of the work stoppages in the past, of all the sports that we could be conceivably talking about for an asterisk, I don't think the NFL does get one based on past history. But that's not to say that it wouldn't happen. And I would be hard-pressed to think that the NBA would have one either. I really would, because they've had other shortened seasons that they just kind of let it slip away. So I don't know. That's a really interesting question, a very intriguing one. I say that there would be no asterisk for the NFL. What do you think, Stuart?
Yeah, if they play, I think, you know, there won't be an asterisk. You'll have a Super Bowl champ. The records will count. You know, I think no asterisk.
Yeah, and for no other reason.
It's not like baseball where we hang on every statistic that there is. You know, baseball is the ultimate statistical sport.
Oh yeah.
I could deal with somebody getting, you know, 900 rushing yards in 10 games and saying, oh, he's the rushing champion. I can be comfortable with that. I can't be comfortable with somebody hitting 460 games and calling him a batting champion.
Now, what do you do? That begs another question that you brought up in the NFL. Someone who gets 900 yards who ordinarily would get 1,000, and, you know, say there's a record 6 straight 1,000-yard seasons.
Yeah.
Does someone lose the streak because of something that was out of his control? Now, in 1981, when Major League Baseball had the strike, they said, you know, if something like that happened, like if a player continually had 200 strikeouts in a season, it didn't, because it was a work stoppage that, you know, players and owners, that the streak would end. But in a case like this, where it was really out of everybody's control.
Because that's a decision that the individuals made. This is beyond, it's a health risk. You know, you can't compare the two, right?
Yeah, but remember this, guys, okay? When the NFL had 14 games and the 1,000-yard rusher was a lot more valued, so you just never know. So there's a history of lesser games with great statistics. So the NFL, and you guys are right on both counts. You know, baseball does depend on a lot more numbers, so therefore they're a bit more magnified. Really, when you think about the amount of numbers in football compared to baseball, you know, that's where, you know, you kind of look the other way and wonder. You know what I'm saying, Stuart and David? Comparing and contrasting the two?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay, when these players, remember the football strike, was it 81, 82? And they played, I think it was 9 games, and, you know, you had weren't
the first two with like replacement players one year?
Right, with replacement players, right. And then they came in like Freeman McNeil was running all over everybody for the Jets, and Andre Franklin was running for the Dolphins. That's a name from the past, Scott.
I remember him.
They got like 700 yards and they won the rushing title.
I actually, believe it or not, David, I covered the Dolphins for a couple of years when I was down here as a young pup.
Then you understand. And you knew exactly what I'm talking about.
Yep.
So, but those records stood. There was no asterisk by it. So I'm just curious.
Well, you made my point for me, David. In fact, that matter, you made Stuart's point too.
I'm trying to sound smart here, Scott.
I'm not. Yeah, that's hardly the least of my concern. But okay, David, if you say so.
And let that go. Just let it go.
That's funny.
All right, what you got, Scott?
Oh no, I mean I think we're blending real well here. I don't have a whole lot to say except the fact that I don't see football having an asterisk. I think there's a lot of unknowns about baseball that we really don't know. I mean, I've asked Mel Farr, does he think any of the will we start, will we finish? And to me, the only sports that I think potentially could finish, well, I figure NASCAR will. Okay, but I think the National Hockey League probably could finish too. And now that we're kind of moved around a little with sports, and it's okay to do this on this broadcast from time to time, because now we're in a position where we're comparing and contrasting each of these sports. I could actually see the National Hockey League crowning a national Stanley Cup champion later in the year. And I say that because you're talking about a sport that's played in a colder environment indoors, right? And you have a lot more equipment. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You have more equipment. NASCAR, you have a lot of equipment as well. So those would be, if I were a betting man, those would be the two that I think would finish it out. What do you think, Stuart? I can't judge cornhole because I'm just learning about what cornhole is. The only time
I mean, in the case of hockey, I definitely agree with that. I mean, the NBA, there is contact with the players, and if they run into each other, and obviously the NBA was, they're the first sport that really shut down. They had players that started testing positive left and right. So the NBA is a risk.
Oh yeah.
Any of the sports, and you have Major League Baseball players, they're sitting in the dugout. The NBA players, you see them sitting on the bench. They're sitting close together. I mean, in hockey, they are sitting on the bench, but they're wearing a lot of equipment.
Right.
So that they're probably more protected than the other sports. Well, and obviously in NASCAR, they're in a car by themselves. So
right.
That's fine.
And think about hockey. Think about hockey's potential bubble, though. That's okay, Dave. Bear with me for a moment. Okay.
Go ahead.
Let's talk about hockey's potential bubble. Now, from what I've heard, Edmonton, in the Western Conference would be one, housing all the Western Conference teams, and Toronto would be what you would call in the Eastern Conference. So you have two hub cities in a country that isn't as badly affected by COVID-19, Canada, a la Canada Day, compared to the U.S., because at one point Las Vegas was considered a possibility to be a hub city, but they got wiped out because of obviously the most recent spike in all these numbers. So again, that validates my point about the NHL. If I were a betting man, to finish, and of course we can't forget about my new favorite league, the Korea Baseball Organization, which is supposed to start fans, I believe, on July 3rd, just in time for the KBO, guys. How about that? Good stuff, eh? Little Canada there. But go ahead, David. Just wanted to get that out there.
It's amazing to me, and remember, hockey's kind of like the forgotten four.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about football and baseball and basketball. Hockey's going to be the one that's the test case. If they can do everything that they say they're going to do, and the players are protected the most on the ice in a cooler environment, then that changes the whole game plan. And how do other sports, although they can't make the changes to simulate what goes on with hockey, but at least health-wise, what are they going to do and take from it and learn from it and then use it?
Yeah, I can only see the NBA playing in sweatsuits instead of shorts. Go figure, right, Stuart? When we were?
I don't think LeBron can skate.
Exactly.
No, but wasn't there a guy overseas who played a European basketball game in a hazmat suit? Seriously, I think that did happen.
I guess they can do that.
I'm just saying, it did happen.
By the way, folks, you're listening to 108 Stitches Baseball Talk here at WSAN Network. My name is Scott Morgan, off the Motor City Manmouth, along with my co-hosts Stuart Hack and David Levin. Glad you can join us tonight, obviously, as we get prepared for the July 4th holiday weekend. But, hey, normally a lot of us would be watching baseball on July 4th, and we're not watching anything on July 4th. It's just a matter of all we're listening to when and if they'll ever start, for that matter, when and if anything will ever start. So who knows? Outside of my favorite new sport called cornhole. Which, by the way, if you're desperate, go to the Cracker Barrel and you can play it there.
Oh, gosh.
And don't forget the cornbread.
I got nothing. I got nothing on that.
It's all about throwing David Levin the curveball, right, Stuart? You and I seem to be doing a good job of that every week, don't we? So,
I'm speechless on that one.
We didn't talk about what we said last week about the perfect game that we brought up last week. So what if, when the season resumes, a pitcher has a perfect game to regulation, and then in the 10th inning they put a man on second?
Well, I kind of alluded to it, that if it wouldn't be a perfect game anymore, it would still be a no-hitter. And
right.
Major League Baseball has to determine how they want to rule that. So I didn't get the definite answer, but that's how it would start out. It's still a no-hitter. How they define what a perfect game is after that, that's up to interpretation by Major League Baseball.
Okay, so here's a situation that actually happened in 1996.
Right, you were telling me. Okay.
In the Summer Olympics, softball.
Mm-hmm.
So Lisa Fernandez, pitcher for the United States, they were playing Australia. The Team US was 5-0 up to that point. No score. And they went to the top of the 10th, still no score. Fernandez still pitching. U.S. scores a run to go up 1-0. So now Fernandez takes the mound, bottom of the 10th, strikes out the first two batters. Now there's a runner. They put in the Olympics, they put a runner on second in the extra innings with nobody out, just like Major League Baseball was doing. So they put a runner on second. She did not have a no-hitter, but she had a 1-0 lead. So she strikes out the first two batters, had two strikes on the last batter, who then proceeded to hit a game-winning 2-run home run for the win.
Oh, wow.
So now,
wow.
What's interesting, and I try to research a few things about this. One, does Lisa Fernandez get the loss? Now, when I look at her career Olympic statistics, it shows she has a loss for that year. However, looking at the line score and just the Olympic stats for that year, she does not have a loss. Also, it appears that this runner that was on second that scored on the home run was an unearned run. So it didn't hurt her ERA or anything like that. She just, got charged with the one run that was the home run. But that was something... something like that could happen. It could be a relief pitcher on the mound in the extra innings, and you put someone there.
Well,
we've also talked about how pitchers. There's going to be a lot of specialists this year. You could see 2 or 3 pitchers combined on a no-hitter or a perfect game this year, because managers are going to keep their pitchers as fresh as they can. And we've seen this with the Braves, and we've seen it with. There was another team last year that did it. It was a combined no-hitter. You're going to see a lot of complicated line scores and decision-making as far as how you're going to score these games.
Yeah, but what's going on right now anyways is we're seeing combined no-hitters anyways. Now this is another reason to do it. But Stuart, let's go back to your point for a moment, okay? You talk about Lisa Fernandez and all the bizarre idiosyncrasies of this. But think about the National Hockey League. I want to go back to that sport for a little bit. Once upon a time, you had win-losses ties, okay? Hockey decided to modify it where we'll have the 5-minute overtime, and then, of course, at least they award a team with a point to get to OT, and then another one with 2. And then, of course, so now you used to have win-losses ties, and then you have another category where the overtime losses literally replaced the ties to get the point. But then how do you go ahead and judge everything when you get to the shootout? You know what I mean? So consequently, you're seeing some bizarre rule changes with shootouts being the equivalent to that extra inning man on second base, which I call a crazy gimmick. But you see where the comparisons are ideally similar. Stuart.
I mean, every sport over time evolves in some way and changes. It, no sport can say they play the game, the rules are the same, 30 years ago. I mean, you remember when the NFL, after regulation, if it was a tie, it was a tie.
Right.
They didn't go into overtime. Same thing in with the NHL, as you said. The only time that you couldn't have a tie was the playoffs because somebody had to go home.
Yeah, nothing like a hockey playoff overtime. The most exciting. First of all, you go to hockey. Hey, you and I, Stuart, are original 6 guys, aren't we? You being up in the metropolitan New York area, and me in Detroit, and I'll tell you, there's nothing like. I think the hockey playoffs are better than any of them, to be honest with you. I do.
I remember, and this is after the original 6. I think it was in the mid to late 80s. I believe it was the Islanders and Capitals playing like a 6 overtime game in the playoffs.
Right. Yeah, that would only be the equivalent to the Miami Dolphins and the San Diego Chargers playing at 41-38. Were you? Epic game there?
Yep. I was at that game. Yep.
Oh, yeah. I had actually just moved down from South Florida there and watched it on TV. It was the most exhausting game to really ever watch, but it was unreal. Talk about epic overtimes.
That was amazing.
Yeah. Sports and their crazy ways of doing things. And that, so... Any thing you want to add to the David?
No, I really enjoyed this tonight. I really like the dynamic that we've got going on here, guys. The fact that we can take topics that are meaningful and be able to put a different kind of spin on it. This is really enjoyable. Thank you so much.
What about you, Stuart? I gave you more than you bargained for now that we dove into some other sports tonight, didn't we? But just because we're
it's fun. It's fun. I enjoy it. Whenever I can talk about sports, I enjoy it. And this is a great dynamic. Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
Oh, you know what? You're a part of the family now, Mr. Hack, okay? Just make sure we know that in my
as long as it's not the Manson family.
Oh, well, you'll get one of the few no comments on me on that one.
That's fantastic.
All I know is you're in my head about the jock tax, even though that won't be anything that I go ahead and bring out there. But today we dedicate the taxes to Bobby Bonilla, not the jock tax. So go figure. So, all right, with that said, okay, David, lead off and let everybody know how they can get a hold of you.
Sure. I write for fanside.com. If you would like to follow me, I'm at marlonmaniac.com and I'm also at blackandteal.com. I'm on Twitter at DM719907.
Go ahead, Stuart. Let it all out, buddy.
All right. So I am with Hack Tax and Accounting Services.com, a firm in Wellington, Florida. That's Palm Beach County. I could be reached at 561-214-6171. On Twitter, HackTax1, my website, www.hacktaxandaccounting.com.
Plus, you can be found on LinkedIn too, right, Stu?
What's that?
You have a LinkedIn account.
I do. LinkedIn, Stuart Hack, EA. Facebook page, Hack Tax and Accounting Services, as well as for my old show, which is Hack Attack on Sports, is a Facebook page as well.
Beautiful. All right. And as for us, well, on Twitter, you can find us at Tribune South. Since we like to talk about hockey, I'm going to give you a nice hat trick right now. Facebook, South Florida Tribune, like it, and you'll get the updates. Instagram, South Florida Tribune, there you go. And I have a YouTube channel, South Florida Tribune. Of course, we've been getting that going more and more, COVID-19. I don't care about you. I'm still going to put these videos together anyways. Website, www.southfloridatribune.com. We have a lot of great columnists on there. We have some content coming in. And also you can find these broadcasts on southfloridatribune.com. The email address for us is southfloridatribune@gmail.com. My personal LinkedIn is Scott Morganroth. You can find us there. And once again, you are listening to 108 Stitches Baseball Talk on the WSAN network. And you can also find these broadcasts wherever you get your podcasts. So any closing thoughts? First of all, what do you plan to do over July 4th, Stuart?
I'm going to be working. I'm going to try and catch the Nathan's Hot Dog Eating Contest, which I think is going to have a pretty different look this year. So it should be interesting to see if Joey Chestnut can win another one under new circumstances, new rules.
Here's a legend. If we brought up Gordie Howe, why not bring up Joey Chestnut? What about you, David Levin?
I'm going to spend time with my family. I'm going to try and maybe get some sleep in. And, of course, I'm going to be writing and working because that's what we do. I hope everybody has a safe and happy 4th of July. I hope there's a little more peace in our country. And I hope we all remember the reason why we are celebrating. And I just hope that when we come back, maybe there's just a different outlook on the next 6 months of the year.
I have to admit, many years ago, I always wanted to get married in July 4th. It never worked out, so I ended up doing it on January 1. But for me, no broadcast until Monday night. So I'll have a chance to relax a little bit. Doesn't mean that I won't be making preparations to get other things done with the company. Just worry about the airtime. So, guys, you guys are absolutely phenomenal and fantastic. We encourage everybody to not only listen to our broadcasts, we also would like you to download them, share them, because we work very hard to bring you the best quality entertainment and information that we can. And we're certainly aiming to get better with every broadcast. And now we are so happy to have this three-man booth with David Levin, Stuart Hack, and myself, the Motor City Mad Mouse, Scott Morgan Russell. On behalf of my dynamic duo co-hosts, David Levin and Stuart Hack, my name is Scott Morgan Roth, the Motor City Man Mouth, hoping that everybody has a wonderful July 4th weekend. Please use common sense, social distance, put the mask on, do everything you can. We don't want you on the wrong side of the statistics. Good night, everybody, until the next time.